Now, today we're going to be talking about why I think ByBit actually proves why the crypto space needs ICP or something like ICP. In my opinion, it's I think fairly easy to see, fairly clear to see. If you've been following kind of anybody on X at all who's a ICP supporter, you've probably already seen a lot of this rationale, but I do think it's worth going over and talking about a little bit more, just because I think it cannot be understated what kind of happened. We'll explain a little bit about that, but how ICP can solve it. And this is something that a lot of the crypto industry isn't really paying attention to. So I want to shed some light on that today. So first off though, before we go into that, we are just going to take a quick look at the overall crypto market. We can see ICP down about 4.5% today, though I will say this is about online, or like in line with kind of a lot of what we've seen from some other things in the market. I mean, there are a couple here down a little bit less, but also I would say the majority of the market probably down an equivalent amount or more. So ICP holding up relatively well in the market today, just kind of compared to other things that we are seeing. Sonic, kind of the only one that's up today. This one has really been flying over the past week and month. Some really nice moves to the upside there. We'll kind of see how that keeps rolling along, but so far it's been good. If we do look at the week, we can see ICP down 1.1%, but again, we've seen a pretty mixed week here. The majority of the market down kind of about that 5 to probably 10% range, some more, and then we have seen a couple that have been up a decent amount. TIA, Tau, Bearchain, Sonic, and Say probably kind of being the big ones, and obviously we've seen IP or Story Protocol doing really quite well also. So we'll kind of have to see how that goes. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with what we're seeing in the market. Well, I guess I wouldn't say pleased, but I think what we're seeing in the market kind of makes sense for where we're at, right? And so we'll talk a little about that here in a second as well. But I did want to actually just take a quick overview of the ICP dashboard as well. We haven't really talked about the ICP dashboard too much recently, but I want to show you something that I find quite impressive. So obviously transactions are down a little bit, which is totally okay, not that big of a deal. TVL kind of about standard, nothing too crazy going on here. What we can see though, very importantly, is the total ICP burned now at 1.2 million. Very impressive. I think this is up I think like 10, maybe even 20 or 30x in the past year. Let's actually just look. Yeah, so we could see a year ago, yeah, so just shy of 10x in the past year, which is very impressive. We can see, look at this burn rate. I mean, we've talked about this before, where we saw that kind of initial spike here, and then the slope kind of started to flatten out a little bit. But look at it. I mean, it's fairly easy to see that this slope continues to get steeper, which is very impressive and unbelievably good news to see. So I'm very pleased with what we're seeing here out of like the ICP burning. This is going to have to still continue to go up. We've been over the ICP tokenomics before. I think we need to be burning like 3 or 4 million ICP a month to kind of negate some of the inflationary pressures of ICP. So, I mean, this needs to like probably go up. Well, actually, let's just look. Over the past month, we've burned about 300-ish thousand. So we still need this to about 10x roughly, 5x minimum, 10x ideally, to kind of get to a point where ICP is kind of more at a stable range in terms of inflationary pressures. But I mean, just look at the growth. I mean, I think, if we kind of track this over the next year or so, it's probably only going to take us between 9 to 12 months to get to that point, which is super promising. The other thing I want to show here, which is 100% what I'm interested in and what I'm looking to see, is we can see that the cycle burn rate is, obviously we saw that spike with kind of the initial release of Bob. It's been kind of trending up. I wouldn't say it's kind of trending up anymore. It's kind of pulled back a little bit, but look at what we're seeing here. I mean, this is holding very steady compared to what we've seen in the past. And a lot of this is because these are just people hosting things on ICP, right? It's not like, Ethereum or Solana where, you can see these massive spikes in token, protocol revenue or, I don't know, all this type of stuff because, something happened, right? It's like, this is pretty consistent. This is pretty, I would say, like, it's very tangible to see kind of how this is trending up and to the right over time, which is very nice to see. Again, kind of everything after about September of last year, we've just kind of been off to the races, which is again, really good to see. I'm very pleased with kind of all of the fundamental things that we're seeing out of the ICP ecosystem. Now back to the point of concern for basically everyone, and that's, okay, the fundamentals are looking fantastic. Price, on the other hand, Not exactly, right? I mean, it's not looking bad, but it's also not really looking good either. So if we zoom in here, first off, we can see, I have been kind of starting to take some trades, just so if you guys are interested in kind of what I'm thinking and how I'm looking at stuff, you can kind of trade along with me. Again, not financial advice. This is purely just to kind of show you how I'm thinking about the market. We can see, obviously, if it works out well or not. So far, it's working decently. We're seeing a little bit of a P&L over here, even though 3 of these positions are down. They're down very, very minimally. ICP and virtuals are the 2 that are up, and then we have Bitcoin, Solana, and Sui, all 3 down currently. But again, I think those are pretty strong projects, of course, and so I do think we'll see those turn around. At the beginning of the weekend, we did see all 5 of those up, so we'll just kind of keep tracking those. Back to ICP specifically, though, we can see we're basically back to the lows prior to this kind of November run up, which is a little frustrating. It does kind of suck. We saw about a 3-ish X almost, kind of from bottom to top here. I think it was probably about 2.5X if I had to just kind of do some quick back of the napkin math. We did actually see ICP hitting over $20 back here in the middle of March or the end of March in 2024. So we did not actually even see ICP returning to new highs towards the end of 2024. So, I mean, there's really no way to sugarcoat it. ICP price action has not been particularly strong. I don't think this is breaking news to anybody. It is a little frustrating given all the super bullish things that we are seeing out of the fundamental, token protocol, all that type of stuff. And it's just not really materializing into price. I do think that we will eventually see this at some point, right? Who knows exactly when, but I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is probably just the market not understanding. I do think there's a fundamental mispricing in the market right now. So we'll have to see kind of what happens there. We can see we've been settling pretty steadily on this level of support here. It's a little bit scary because if we do break this support, I mean, so far this has been a pretty strong level of support at multiple different times. But if we do break this support, we're probably going to be heading back into this $5 range, maybe even reaching lows of about $2. I mean, that would be rough, but I would say do not write it out of existence. It's 100% could happen. And so, just be prepared for that if that is what comes to pass. So, but what we can see here is one thing I've kind of focused on. We're seeing this kind of mostly throughout the entire crypto market. And it's very important to keep a very close eye on, because what we can see here, Bollinger Bands are squeezing, and they're squeezing tight, right? And so usually when we see this happen, this means we're going to see some level of volatility. Where? We don't know. But what we do know is that volatility is coming. So I would say probably one of 2 things. If we see volatility to the downside, this is going to be probably pretty devastating for the ICP chart. It would not surprise me if we saw 3, 4, maybe even $2 ICP, but I don't know, probably $3 to $4 ICP remains a possibility in my opinion. Again, I don't actually know for sure, but if we saw some volatility to the upside, then I do think reclaiming this $10 mark is very possible. Maybe we even get up to this 11 or 12, or even up at this $13.80 mark. So we'll have to see. Overall, I think the market to me still fundamentally looks pretty sound. I think if we see a volatility move, it'll probably be a move to the upside. But again, who knows for sure, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to know, particularly in the short term. But what I do want to point you to is you can see whenever Bollinger Bands start to squeeze, you can see it here. We did see a breakout. This one happened to be the upside. That's not a guarantee though. If we look over, we could probably find some others here. Yeah, same type of thing, super tight squeeze, and then a little bit of, started kind of to trend up, and then we saw, kind of this thing blow wide open, and that's when we saw a really, really massive appreciation of ICP price. So, it can happen. We probably can look at periods in the past, maybe not in the recent past. Well, I guess maybe here, right? Like you could see they were squeezing pretty tight, and then we saw a little bit of a move to the downside here. So, that is a possibility. I'm not saying that when we see it squeeze, it's up only. I am kind of biased that we'll see a move to the upside, just kind of given that we're on a level of support here, and also that I think the market is probably overly bearish, particularly when it comes to altcoins right now. But again, that doesn't really count for anything. That's just my opinion. So anyway, that's kind of what we're seeing out of the ICP chart. If we do look at the RSI, we're just out of neutral into the weak territory. So pretty decent. I mean, it's not oversold or you know, very oversold. So, you know, I think it's still okay there. But if you are interested in trading ICP or, you know, doing anything like that, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all that good type of good stuff, I do have that link in the description below to BTCC. You guys know about it at this point. You know, 10% bonus, all that other type of good stuff. I'll spare you the time of you know, kind of going over it all. You know it all. If you're looking to trade, all that type of stuff, link in the description below, and we'll continue to move on. So the first one I wanted to talk to you about today was Fabio actually did a BNB versus ICP quarterly revenue comparison. Now, this is the first of two revenue comparisons that we're going to be going over today. So you can see just how really impressive the growth of ICP has been so far. And it's just, again, you know, the fundamental kind of metrics here continue to surprise me. And for whatever reason, you know, people just aren't really catching on. And so, again, I have I've got my convictions, so I don't really care short term what happens to price. I think a lot of people who are afraid about short term price movement don't actually really have conviction. They're looking for price movement to kind of validate a risk that they took, because again, they don't really have a whole bunch of conviction. So they're looking for price to validate the risk that they took. And if it doesn't, then they start to feel really bad about, you know, maybe the decision they made. And if that's the case, you know, it's probably because they may not have understood it too well. So what we can see here is in Q1 of 2024, ICP generated about 61,000 in revenue, and BNB did generate about 4.88 million in revenue. Now, in Q1 of 2025 so far, ICP has generated 4.3 million in revenue, and BNB has only generated 4 million in revenue. So, I mean, as you can see, a very, very impressive move to the upside in terms of fees generated. I mean, basically back in Q1, almost nothing, and now actually topping BNB. So of course, Q1 is not over yet. We have, you know, the end of this month and the end of March as well. So it is highly possible, especially with some of the meme tokens and all this type of stuff heating up on BNB, that maybe this does kind of, you know, flip back. But I think the important news here isn't actually the fact that ICP flipped BNB. It's just look at the comparison year over year. I mean, it's very, very impressive. And so this is something that, you know, obviously I'm always looking at this type of stuff, tracking this type of stuff. One of the reasons that I hate social media, is a little bit of a side tangent, is I feel like it kind of forces you into some of these echo chambers, which is unfortunate because some of the things that I've been seeing recently are just ridiculously bullish for ICP. There's tons of amazing news happening. The growth is astounding. There's a bunch of people who really have, you know, very strong convictions. They understand the project deeply. They explain it very eloquently, a lot of that type of stuff. But of course, you know, I'm kind of stuck in that echo chamber, which is unfortunate, because I think if more people saw, particularly regarding this ByBit thing, because I know we kind of started the video out with this, particularly with this ByBit thing, if people understood how ICP worked, how it functions, a lot of that type of stuff, you know, this could have maybe prevented the ByBit thing. Because the problem that most crypto projects have is that they're essentially interacting with two things simultaneously. They're interacting with the application's back end, and they're also interacting with the blockchain. Now, they're not interacting with both of them the same way. They're going two different directions. Right. And so essentially, what, at least from my understanding, again, I'm no, you know, blockchain forensic analysis expert, but from everything that I've read and I've seen and, you know, tried to kind of figure out or ascertain how exactly this happened, is what happened is essentially they kind of, like, the hackers kept showing the people this route, well, which is the like UI front end, even back into like the app route, but they changed this route, which is the route that was actually interacting with the blockchain directly. And so because of that, they were able to essentially look like they're sending something someplace, but it went the other, right? And so that's why ICP is so important, is because you're not forking that like interaction anymore. Because a lot of what we've seen so far is a lot of these like dApps are hosted on AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure or whatever, right? And so you have to have kind of that like that fork in terms of who you're talking to, because you need to talk to your app where all the data is held, but you also need to talk to the blockchain to convey the like actual payment being made. And so that's something that I think a lot of people don't really understand the nuance of, because when you're on ICP, everything's on chain. So everything just goes to ICP. So something like that happening, at least again, from my understanding, is almost impossible to do. And if people understood that, I think that would be a massive like kind of PSA or ad for ICP and why it's technologically superior to some of these other decentralized applications, because they're not totally like completely held on chain. And this is one of the ways that can cause a little bit of an issue. So anyway, hopefully kind of that explanation makes sense as to why ICP is valuable compared to some of the other things that we are seeing and how it could prevent some of these hacking type situations from happening in the future. The other thing to note, ICP's never really gone down. There's never been a security incident like this. Now, again, you have kind of the, I will make the counter argument of there are other protocols that are just far more popular than ICP, right? So they're going to be essentially subjected to far more volume in terms of like attempted scams than something like ICP might be. But again, that's still not to kind of harsh the record that ICP has seen, which is flawless at this point so far. So again, something to keep in mind. The other thing I want to go over, this is the second comparison in terms of like protocol revenue. We can see this was between Near now, revenue comparison in Q1, ICP 4.3 million, Near 973K, so almost 4x Near, which is very impressive. And then as we can see, still a lower fully diluted market cap than Near. So there's a lot of interesting things going on here. I'd love to kind of see the 2024 comparison, because again, in Q1 of 2024, ICP was kind of at that like 61K. I would imagine Near is probably between the 5 to 900K if I had to take a rough guess. Again, I don't know for sure, but I know Near has been kind of fairly well established for the past year or so. And so I do think it'd be kind of cool to see that growth as well. And actually, we can kind of see it here. We don't have perfect numbers, but it looks like, Near is actually higher than what it is now. So it's probably about 1.2-ish million, and again, ICP was at like that 61K or whatever. So really, really impressive. I'm very pleased with kind of the growth that we are seeing, and it's starting to flip a lot of these larger protocols, which is really cool to see, because it means that it's growing, it's working. A lot of the like fundamental things we are seeing are actually coming, and they're sticking around too. It's not just one of these like flash in the pans. We see some spike, it flipped so and so for this single day and then never again, right? I mean, that's not how it's been working. So anyway, really, really happy with kind of what we're seeing in the ICP ecosystem. The only complaint that I have remains price, but again, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, it's just what it is. I don't really care that much, if I'm being honest, just because I think like I have conviction in my play, or in my in kind of the decision that I've made long term, that it's going to be good, right? It could be right, could be wrong. I have no idea. Really, no one has any idea. But I think the tech, what we're seeing, the fundamental value that's being created within that ecosystem, I just don't know how long you can ignore it, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking at. We'll see, right? Hopefully you did find the information in this video. If you did, please do let me know. Leave me a like, leave me a subscribe, all that good type of stuff. I do really appreciate all of your feedback as well. So if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, dropping those in the comment section would be a fantastic way to kind of leave that for me. I do try to read and respond to all of those. So if you have anything you want me to see, that'd be a really great way to do so. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.